Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support. So get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss.
Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to episode 200. I'm Jeff Schaus. With me tonight is my co-host, Ryan Richardson. JD's off on the road. With any luck, we'll be hearing from him next week. That doesn't mean there isn't housework to be done. I will probably be finishing old bathroom as soon as all said and done here. You're listening to the Mead House podcast. We are absolutely everywhere. iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, now even Amazon Music. You can find all those and more right on our homepage, www.themeadhouse.com, or just search for The Mead House on your favorite podcast platform. In this episode, on segment 1, our friend Jessica Nebesky from Mountain Rose Herbs joins us to talk about what she's seen at Mountain Rose over the pandemic and give us her thoughts about a non-specific secret ingredient. What's that? You heard it right. Iron Bee 2021 is coming. In segment 2, what do you think about people planning your new brewery? Ryan got to experience the joy of moving last year. I'm getting my house in the market, moving to a new place myself. As I go, I'm putting more and more gray matter into thinking about how I want to set up and organize my brew space. Ryan and I talked about what we think about when it comes to what we need, what we can do without, and how we keep it organized. In segment 3, the social club, where we answer questions from homebrewers like you with no formal expertise, just the results of our own trial and error. All that tonight at the Mead House. But first, a big thank you to all our Mead House supporters who help keep the Mead House podcast free. You too can become a Mead House key holder and help support the show for as little as $2 a month. We have some thank you gifts to send you, not to mention key holder only content. Get over to patreon.com, search for the Mead House, or just click the link in the show notes and do your part to help keep the show in the air. So what are we drinking tonight? I will start off. I have beets in front of me. One of them is my strawberry mead that I made with Kvike yeast. Still has a very strong strawberry nose. It's very sweet, again, a little sweeter than I intended it to be. I'm still getting the strawberry flavor through there, but there is a little bit of a bitter aftertaste now that it's been sitting for a while. So, it's about time that this got drank up, it seems like. In class, I am playing Closet Roulette again. So I found a brown bottle with a gold cap that just has the letter W on it. I have a couple suspicions as to what this may be, but honestly, this box is probably from when we did the first Iron Bee, so it's a little bit old. Coming out, it's quite hazy, very carbonated. This is a whip racket that I did a while back. A lot of tart orange flavor on it. The hops were never very strong in the first place, and they are pretty much gone now, but there's a lot of breadiness to it, a little bit of honey coming over the mid palate. Yeah, still all right, pretty good. Ryan, what's in your glass tonight?
Hey, Jeff. it almost seems like a shame, doesn't it? We're on episode 200. 200 episodes. I think actually, if you go back, that we're numbering this one as episode 200. But I think we had one or two special releases in there. So depending on how you want to count them, but episode 200, and instead of people hearing that molasses of JD, they're hearing the equivalent of nails on a chalkboard with you and I. So I think people thought that they might get be in for something extra special tonight. And it's not starting off that well. So we'll see if we can if we can help them out um, a little later here in the show. Uh, Jeff, have you ever been certain of something and spoke about it like you were, like you were sure,
Oh yeah,
and then found out that you were horribly wrong?
I have
Um,
to be treated for foot and mouth disease several times. Yes.
absolutely. So last week I was talking about how I had a batch of bottle bombs,
Mhm.
and I said, "Oh, I've got these bottle bombs," and what happened was my hydrometer, I must have not taken a hydrometer reading, or the gravity wasn't there, and uh I went on and how to have, make sure you have a good procedure and a good process and all that.
Sure.
Well, I spoke very confidently and very sure of myself in saying what the problem was. And then after the show, Andrea says that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. And I said, "Oh, refresh my memory because things kind of run together." And what happened was, no, the gravity was perfect. The gravity was absolutely perfect in that rosé. What happened was I was making up a priming mixture. Like basically you're making a simple syrup, just not going down that far. You're not, when you kind of boil some sugar and water, or honey and water, and then you put that in your bottling bucket as your priming sugar. Well, what happened was I had measured that perfectly, and then um, spilled some of it en route. So I took it off the stove, and from the stove to the bottling bucket, some had spilled, and I just took the honey jar and kind of eyeballed what I thought kind of would be needed.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where I went wrong. That's where how those bottles got overcarbonated. It wasn't. It was on the back end. It was the eyeballing the spilt priming sugar. But I spoke very confidently and very very sure of myself last week when I was just completely wrong about why they were bottle bombs.
Well, and
So it
props to your
happens.
wife for providing that timely correction. That's what they're great for.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think a common phrase around here is "That's not what happened."
That sounds like a familiar refrain.
So, all right. Um, so in my cup now, I am drinking one of my lemon meads. So lemon meads, lemon melomels. This one is based off of the Skeeter pea recipe, which
Okay.
is made typically again with wine or with sugar. Kind of make a lemon wine almost. They make out of it,
Right.
or a lemon a session lemon wine. But I use the honey on it, and very good. Again, we've talked about Skeeter pea quite a bit, and tried to find the infamous inventor of it. He is known. He's just hard to find.
Sure.
And but anyway, it's a very good. I don't want to ramble here. It's a very good, refreshing, super refreshing. Lemon melomel. I carbonate mine up, and you can make it as sweet or as tart as you like, just like lemonade. Absolutely delicious, and wonderful on a hot night. I was down at the Diamond tonight, coaching my team, and man, one of these definitely hits the spot after a tough 9 innings. So, absolutely. So let's bring in our guest tonight. As Jeff mentioned, she has joined the show before. This is Jessica Nebesny of Mountain Rose Herbs. She's been on the show. She was back on the show. I want to say it was March of 2020. So, more than a year ago, it was more than a year ago when she last joined us. We had a great conversation then. And she is joining us now. And if you remember the last reason she joined us, we might get a clue of why she's joining us again tonight. But we'll get into that. Jessica, welcome back to the Mead House. And what are you drinking tonight?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I know this is probably a little sacrilege, but I'm actually sipping on some tea tonight. I still have some yard work ahead of me, so I don't want to get too relaxed on my end. So I made a nice herbal tea, actually with the Iron Bee competition secret ingredient. So getting very well acquainted with the flavor profile of that particular herb. And yeah, I'm excited that you guys are going to be able to experiment with that ingredient. And yeah, I would love to jump into that, that flavor profile.
Yeah. Before we do that, Jessica, and I lose my train of thought here. I've gone on to the Mountain Rose Herbs blog many times, and there's all kinds of fantastic recipes on there. And one of the things that always intrigued me, I'm not an herbalist, herbal expert by any means, or even not. I shouldn't say it's my first. I'm well knowledgeable. We'll put it this way. I'm not well knowledgeable in it. I've done the elderberry syrup, during cold and flu season. And I like doing that kind of thing. And I do some different herbal teas and some things like that. But I by no means am is super knowledgeable. But I see these blends on there that I think recipes from you and some of your colleagues that will say things like a stress relief tea, or a muscle relaxer tea, or things like that, a mental cleanse tea, or something. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the names on some of these things, but I'm always curious to find out now how. Just about probably any cup of tea. I mean, you could give me, a cup of chamomile with a little lemon in it, a little honey in it. It's probably gonna, relax me. But tell me a little bit about what some of these tea blends that you put together, how they really do that, how they kind of help you have different benefits to the body and mind.
Yeah, that's a great question. So tea blends are really fun to make because there's so many layers that you can sort of add onto each other, just like making mead. So a lot of times we'll take, our key ingredient, which will be sort of the thing that sort of helps with stress relief or mental clarity, sort of the goal of the tea. And then we'll sort of add some other flavor notes so that it's really enjoyable to sip. So we'll add, somewhat of an earthier note. Maybe a little bit of mint to give it a little bit of a top flavor, or a citrus splash, or things like that to sort of balance it out. I'm sure as mead makers you understand that principle very well, but typically we start with sort of what our goal is, and we pick that ingredient accordingly. So the actual ingredient for the Iron Bee competition, it's also going to have some properties of like stress management and anxious nerves and things like that. So it's actually a wonderful ingredient for this time.
That's great. So just as so we don't confuse anybody or bury the lead, yes, the Iron Bee is back. Iron Bee 3 is back, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as the show goes on. But the first the main competition, or as we call it, the main event, again, is a secret ingredient. Again, the secret ingredient mead making competition, and and Mountain Rose Herbs is again sponsoring that. So when you sign up, and we'll get into all the details again. If you've done this before, heard about it before, it's a wonderful event. You sign up, we send you the ingredient, and you make your mead, and you send it back to us. And so a little bit, we tried to do a little feel coy tonight, where Jessica is going to, I don't know, maybe I don't want to even say hints or clues, because that's not the point of it. She's just gonna talk a little bit as I guess coyly as she can, and about what the possibilities might be for this ingredient, and I guess some of the properties. I guess it's got some stress management or things like that. Jeff, I could always use stress management. I don't know about you, but I probably run on the high end of stress management. Or in need of that. I'm always, seems like I'm always carrying some tension. But that might just be because every time you open a bottle, I don't know if it's going to bomb.
And I have a feeling after the year that we've all had, I think our listeners could use some stress management as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jessica, what can you tell us without telling us anything?
I will watch my words carefully. This particular herb, the flavor profile is slightly vegetal, maybe a little bit grassy, but not very strong flavor. So it's not necessarily going to be, the star of the show, but it does play well with others. It does sort of have maybe a little tinge of sweetness to it, very subtle, of course, but it does have a little bit of a sweet, earthy base to it. But yeah, ultimately, it will definitely play well with a lot of different ingredients, so you can really use this one to sort of make it your own. And I think it would lend itself very well to a wide spectrum of other flavors, tart and sweet and everywhere in between.
Wow, excellent. So it sounds like this is going to be an excellent ingredient that now in the past we've had the first year we had fenugreek. So fenugreek was Iron V1, that was secret ingredient. And we had an amazing variety of styles of mead. I mean, all along the spectrum. That's what we loved getting that. Last year, we had for Iron V2 was rose hips. It might have been a slightly narrower spectrum of types of meads. I think people, there were definitely people that pushed the envelope and took rose hips in ways that I wouldn't have thought. But I don't know. I guess do you think it was a little bit of a narrower spectrum than the first year, or do you think it was just as broad? I mean, our audience is absolutely creative.
We had a lot of creative entries. I will say I feel like a lot of the entries were either trying to be rose hips and just a rose hip mead, or else very fruit forward. Not that that's a bad thing in either case, but there was a slightly narrower window of variety that we saw compared to the fenugreek. That said, I was still blown away by so many entries. I mean, you can go back and listen to episodes where I talked about the judging, and there was a really great variety in these.
Absolutely. Now, this year, I think that this ingredient is going to probably open it. I think we'll get back to like the fenugreek spectrum. I think this one is going to allow people to get extremely creative again and take it in just about any direction they want. Jessica, I know you're making you said you're using a tea right now. Now, if you know, I think like you said, a good analogy is the tea to a mead. You know how you're trying to build your flavor profile and some things like that. Do you think that this ingredient, and I probably shouldn't even say this, maybe we shouldn't answer it. Jeff, you can tell me if we shouldn't answer it after I say it. But
we can always cut this later.
Do you think, well, sometimes that doesn't happen, so you'll just have to be quick to the draw. Do you think that this ingredient could stand up on its own, or do you think it really, would be better with some supporting actors?
I would definitely say it would be stronger with supporting actors. I would compare this to sort of like a middle note in tea blending or aromatherapy, just sort of that sort of thing that ties everything else together, sort of like a harmonizer, if you will. So I definitely could see it with some added top notes, some more vibrancy, and maybe a little bit of earthy, draw down a little bit. I would say like on a scale of 1 to 10, this would fit somewhere on like the 4. So it's really quite exactly in the middle, I would say.
Excellent. That is as perfectly nondescript. And I mean, I'm listening to it and I'm thinking to myself, it sounds brilliant, but I'm not exactly sure what she's saying.
So as a corollary to this question, when we talk about combining with other flavors, are there any flavors or flavor types that you would see not necessarily being a bad combination, but maybe a more challenging to get a good match with?
Jeff, I'm gonna veto that one. Just I want us to be as let's let Mead House Nation figure out how they want to use this one. But I think the point is that you can go a lot of directions with this, is what I'm hearing here. And we are really excited. We will make the announcement when registration opens. And Iron V3 registration, it's going to go quick. Again, everybody, so we will make that announcement so that you can register. We have a limited number of the secret ingredients, so it's important that you register right away so that we can get those out to you and you can start experimenting with this fabulous ingredient, from Mountain Rose Herbs, and get your mead going. Before we get ourselves in too much trouble, I want to shift gears here. Now, Jessica, last couple of months, we've been talking with a lot of professionals and amateurs and asking them how their brewing has changed, through the pandemic. And it's been along the spectrum. Some have brewed more, some have brewed less, some have gone to classic styles, some have gone to experimental styles, all over the board. Well, what I'm interested in is you've got a really, really unique take, because, and I don't just mean alcohol. I just mean people in general, what they're buying and what they're trying out, because you at Mountain Rose Herbs get to see what people are ordering. So I don't mean like what Jeff orders. I just mean overall, if there's a spike in demand for specific ingredients. Tell us what, in the last year plus, has there been what what ingredients or products have kind of become spiked in popularity or demand, or what have people been interested in if they're looking at your blogs and things like that? I'd love to hear what your take is on how what people were interested in this last year.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting experiment to watch, just sort of how people's mentality changes around, their interests and what's important in terms of what they're bringing into their homes. We definitely saw a huge increase in immune supporting herbs and mushrooms and things like that. So of course, I know you mentioned earlier elderberries. We couldn't keep those in stock, long enough. It was just they were just flying off the shelf. That and different types of mushrooms like reishi mushrooms and shiitake and chaga mushrooms, all known to be supporting for the immune system. So all of those things were very, very popular. Also, a lot of berries, just because of the antioxidant properties. So hawthorn berries, bilberries, acai, maqui berries. We saw a huge increase in things like that. Also, one really interesting one that I thought was our sprouting seeds, because a lot of people had, they were trying to stay out of the grocery stores and not touching produce that was open. So we saw an increase in sprouting seeds because then they could, grow their own greens at home. So that was pretty interesting. And then in terms of just content that we create, a lot of people have been interested in honing their sort of survival recipes, things like that are promote more resiliency, DIY skincare and home care products, green cleaning, just sort of, again, trying to stay out of the grocery stores and sort of empower themselves with what they have in their homes already. So it's been really interesting. I'm the content planner for Mountain Rose. So just sort of catering to those increased interests has been really fun for me, actually. It's been a wild ride.
Wow. So I know that you've got you talked about some of those berries, and so they're obviously dry, or you're not sending like fresh berries across the country. What and what are people doing with them when they get them? Are they using those in teas or tinctures, or what's more? I mean, more common. What's the common usage of something like that?
Yeah, so I would say some of the most popular ways to use them are things like syrups, definitely tinctures. Also, people have been increasingly interested in oxymels, which are sort of like a vinegar extract with honey. Especially if people are trying to avoid alcohol, they try to do it that way instead. And teas, of course. I would say those are the most popular ways. We also sell them in powdered form, so people will make them sometimes into little, like, what we call pastilles, which are sort of like they're like powder. You mix powder with honey, and you make them into almost like little, like, cough droppy type of things, but they're not hard like cough drops. They're kind of gooey, and people will take their herbs that way. We always recommend just taking herbs however you're going to take them more regularly. I think some people, get so wrapped up in, tinctures are faster absorbing into the body, or, this is a better extraction process, but really it comes down to how you're going to enjoy them the most. So yeah, we always recommend just, going with how your lifestyle is set up.
Very interesting. I made I said an elderberry syrup, and it was elderberries and ginger and cinnamon and honey. I think that was it. It was I boiled the elderberries, and then I forget if I boiled or steeped in. I followed the recipe out, and I think it was on your website. that had it called for the elderberries, the ginger, the cinnamon, and then I added honey to it, and I think it said you could extend the shelf life or something by adding alcohol, like a grain alcohol or something, if you wanted to give it more stability. And then also interesting because I made two batches. In the second batch, I decided to add some cherry bark, and I thought that would kind of give it a nice little, I guess, a you know character or punch or something. And it was very, very delicious. Now, I tried to get my kids to take it, and they didn't. I think the ginger might have been too spicy for them or something, or maybe not too spicy, because I mean they'll eat salsa and spicy stuff, but I don't know. I think my guess is it might have been the ginger that kind of threw them, but that's not here nor there. We don't spend much of the show talking about what kids like or don't like, how to get your kids to eat their vegetables. Um, but no, really, really interesting stuff. Now, have you seen some of those things change as more of the country opens up, or have you seen some of these things kind of around to stay? That people, if they got into making some kind of a health tea or a health vinegar, or get into green cleaning, has that demand been sustained, or is it kind of receding a little bit here?
I think it's here to stay. I think it was really empowering for people to realize how much they're able to do under their own roof, how much they're able to make. And a lot of these things that they're creating are cost saving too, rather than buying, cleaner at the grocery store or whatever for a fraction of the cost. You can make your own. So I think it's sort of empowered people to see things through a different lens and just sort of know how resilient they really are. And yeah, it's been beautiful to see, really. I've really enjoyed watching how, I don't know, people are kind of coming into their own and being able to trust in their abilities more and more. So yeah, it's been awesome.
That's great. Last question for me before you said you had to get back to some yard work here. Um, right around Thanksgiving, the McCormick Spice Company put out I don't know, a press release, or got an article published kind of talking about, if you still have any tins, of McCormick spices, those are all at least 20 years old. You should throw them away. And so now, in general, I know that you've been on the show before, and your predecessor, who was on the show before that, talked about how the mountain rose, everything that you send is fresh and sealed and just height of perfection. But let's just say somebody like me or like Jeff, we order some bilberries or something, or some elderberries or cherry bark or something, and well, we kind of get distracted, or it sits around, and it just we find it in a box later on. What what is the peak for some of these types of things that you should kind of say, oh, this is, do you want to use it upon arrival, or do you have a little bit of grace time, and how long is too long?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it does vary depending on what the herb is. So for things like barks and roots, your shelf life is about 2 to 3 years. So those stick around a lot longer. They don't oxidize quite as fast. Where like cut herbs and leaves and things like that, the guesstimated shelf life of that is about 1 to 2 years. And then powdered herbs oxidize the fastest, just because they're so exposed to air. Obviously, the surface area is exposed to air at a greater volume. So that would be good for up to a year. So a lot of times in grocery stores, when you go in and, all those powdered herbs have been sitting there for God knows how long and have been bottled for God knows how long, really does not lend itself to optimal freshness. Where a Mountain Rose, we actually hand fill every order to order. So it's only going into the package as soon as it's ready to arrive at your house. It pretty much doesn't get any fresher than that.
That's great. And of course, with the Iron B, no one is going to have to worry about any shelf life issues because the packed fresh, scent immediately, and then from Mountain Rose to Jeff, and then from Jeff out, as soon as you make your entry, Jeff will get it to you, and you've got to turn something around very quickly here for the competition. So this should be just fresh on fresh here with the Iron B, which I think is only going to help folks.
Well, I can't make guarantees, but in the last couple instances, we have been more than halfway full before I even received the ingredients from Mountain Rose. So turnaround on those was very, very prompt. So yeah, very fresh.
Yes, excellent. Well, Jeff, anything else for Jessica before we need to let her get back to? I don't know. I was staining the deck earlier, but I'm sure is doing something a little more green thumb by the sound of it.
Sounds like we all have our little chores to accomplish tonight. So, Jessica, we've talked a time or two about teas on this one, and I know when I was first starting out, I had some fun with tea blends, just using those as like a base for mead. If our listeners are browsing around on the Mountain Rose website, are there any either blends or tea ingredients that you can recommend that play nice with honey that they might be, just worth checking out for a laugh?
Yeah, I would say the first one that comes to mind is our honeybush tea.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like a rooibos. It's really sweet. It's sort of a red tea.
Okay.
We actually have a Braggot company here in town that uses it to make one of their blends. And I go there frequently and enjoy. So I know it brews well. So that's the first one that comes to mind. We also have a relatively new tea called our what is it? Berry. It's the only berry tea that we have. Berry Bramble is what it's called.
Gotcha.
And it's super sweet and fresh and just juicy. I really like that one. That would probably make a really nice sweeter mead.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's quite lovely. And then I would say those are the two that immediately come to mind.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. Before we let you go here, where can we find Mountain Rose on the web here?
Yeah, so our website is mountainroseherbs.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's been great having you on, and thank you guys for supporting the Iron B for third year in a row. That is fantastic. We really enjoyed speaking with you tonight, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, and we love what you all do.
Thank you, Jessica.
Bye.
Bye.
So
Did
Iron
you
B.
want me to stick around for me? Oh, sorry.
You can hang out as long as you want, Jessica. Otherwise, feel free to get back to the artwork.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Is there anything you needed? Oops, sorry.
No.
Go ahead.
There's nothing else we need from you.
Okay, perfect. All right, you guys have a good night.
All right, you too. Good night.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Okay, we'll pick it up from there. So Iron B 2021 is coming soon.
Yeah, we will let everybody know when registration is open. It was going to open soon here. We've got to just figure out the timing a little bit. But what we can tell you is that the format for the competition is going to be the same as it was in the previous 2 years. There is the secret ingredient event in which you register. Basically, you create like a dummy entry,
Mhm.
and once you register, we will send you the secret ingredient, and usually some other goodies make their way into that package as well. And then once you make your mead, you will then update your entry, with the tasting notes and the sweetness level and the alcohol level, as always. So as we've done that with that, and then we also have a side challenge, and so it is. Again, so the first year we did the MVP, the mint vanilla pine challenge. Very interesting, very very creative, interesting stuff there that people made. Last year we had they call it the braggot shootout. So this was make a braggot, make your best braggot, and send it in, and we any style of braggot, and that was the second entry. This year we are going to do a repeat of the braggot challenge. So again, the second entry category is braggots, or our braggots is
Mhm.
our what the proper syntax there. Um, anyway, so when you register, you will automatically get two entries. You will get one entry for the secret ingredient, and the second entry for your braggot. So you get to make two meads, you get to send them in. Please do that. We had a few people last year, for whatever reason, either got confused or didn't have a mead, one or the other ready, and they only sent a secret ingredient mead, or they only sent a braggot. Again, we really encourage you to do both. I mean, like 95% of people sent both last year, and we understand things happen, but that's the idea here. The idea is, think of this as a two entry competition that you're going to do. You're going to make one secret ingredient mead, and you're going to make one braggot, and you're going to send those in, and we will have those two categories. And the only way to enter the Iron Bee is it's a club competition. It is a club competition, and the club is the Mead House Keyholder Club. So you must be a Mead House keyholder to enter, and those memberships start at $2 a month. For $2 a month, and all that money goes to keeping the Mead House free. We have expenses here with hosting and other things for the podcast. So that's where what that is funding, is helping keep the Mead House on air and keeping it free. Our key holders do that. We give them some amazing gifts, as little as $2 a month. You can help support us, and when you are a key holder, again, this is only for key holders. Entries are free. So there's not an additional charge on top of being a key holder to enter. Just, you're a key holder, you register, and you're in. You can become a key holder at any time, and enter the competition. So Jeff's really good at helping people. Sometimes people get confused, and they register, but they're not a key holder, or they're a key holder and they don't know how to register. Jeff's always really good at helping everybody with that. But that's the rub. I think same as last year and same as the year before that. It is an absolute fantastic event. People said this is one of the most fun events that they do. We have people who this is their first competition ever, all the way through grizzled veterans, in the competition circuit doing it. And just fantastic, just wonderful. Please consider entering, become a Mead House key holder. And before we open it up to everybody, we always send the current key holders an email and make sure all the current key holders know that registration is open, so that all of them can get in prior to others. What happens is a lot of people become key holders to enter the competition, and that's great. I mean, don't absolutely go ahead. That's encouraged. But we also want to make sure that the people that are current key holders, get that first chance to enter. And again, there are limited spots available, limited quantity of secret ingredients. Mountain Rose is very generous, but they can't keep the spigot on indefinitely. So we have a limited supply of secret ingredients, meaning limited entries. So become a key holder now. Become a key holder right now, and if you're not already. And that way, as soon as registration opens, you will be in the first group of people that have the ability to register for the event. And we'll make this just absolutely a fantastic, wonderful event. Last year, Jeff and I gathered to do the final round judging in an undisclosed Iowa cornfield. And that was fun. I don't know if we're gonna have to do that again or not. I mean, things are opening up fast here, so maybe things will be a little bit different here. But that was pretty fun. Meeting you out in an Iowa cornfield to do the final round judging. So anyway, anything else that we need to cover on the Iron Bee?
No, I think you've covered all the stops. Like you said, it's patrons only, and the current patrons will get a heads up as far as when that competition gets open, as opposed to everybody else that just has to wait for the episode to drop where we announce that. So, yeah.
And we're just talking this a couple of weeks here. A couple of weeks, and we'll probably have this thing open. Right, Jeff? Jeff's the technical engineer on the registration website.
We're ironing out that website a little bit more every year, I swear. I think we're getting our I's dotted and T's crossed, so we should be opening up pretty soon here.
All right, as soon as all the lowercase j's are dotted in the next couple of weeks, next few weeks, get ready. So take this opportunity right now to become a key holder. We still have some wonderful gifts, key holder gifts, if you join us at different levels. And then you can also make sure that you get into that Iron Bee competition here with limited spots available. And I'm not gonna pull punches here. I think it is the most fun competition that you can get into. So
very laid back, and I think this year we can definitely hopefully have an actual gathering for that final award ceremony instead of having to announce it on the podcast like we did last year, right?
I think so. I mean things are definitely opening back up. I think the restrictions are pretty much all removed here in Minnesota, which is where we had the event for Iron Bee 1. So I would anticipate it. Absolutely. I think that it's something we can do here now. Again, the dates haven't been decided. Nothing's been decided yet. But as soon as that happens, I think that it would be just remarkable again to get people involved, and that was one of the great meat events of the year.
Oh yeah.
And across the spectrum of meat, of the meat world, to get all those people together in St. Paul, and just lots of meads, lots of laughs, lots of good conversation, lots of Lots of good notes, frankly,
Oh
on just
yeah.
things you hadn't thought about. So
Well, we got to meet our listeners. We got to meet so many of our guests. I got to meet so many of our guests, and wow, it. I am looking forward to that almost as much as I'm looking forward to the competition itself.
yeah, we had people come from across the country. I mean, people came from across the country to
We
this event.
did.
People from, Michigan and Oklahoma and California and Missouri, um, and that was just top of my head of coming to this thing. It's absolutely fantastic. And I mean, you had so many great mead makers to think about. I don't want to stroke his egos or these egos, but guys like you Matt Whitey and Steve Fletty and Al Boyce. You were all there. Kevin Mensma, Susan Rude. Just really, really fan. And I'm not trying to exclude anybody because there were so many fantastic people there. Steve Piatz, just unbelievable folks and lead makers, and it would be just absolutely wonderful to do that again. And I think we can. I think we can. I think we will. I'll be bullish on it and think that's something that we can definitely do.
And I think we should also say this is definitely something that you listening should try and attend, no matter where you are in the country, because it's a fantastic time.
Yes, it absolutely is. Okay.
Let's switch gears.
Absolutely switching gears.
So, like I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm moving, and my lovely wife has expressed to me that she is tired of me having homebrew stuff cluttering up her kitchen. So the basement in the future home is going to have a dedicated brew space, and I've been thinking more and more about how I want to organize that, what I want to put in that, because we've talked so many times about simplifying things, and it has really hit home for me that this is the way to do it. So what I keep thinking over is, what do I need? What do I want? And I know you probably went through a very similar kind of a quandary yourself last year when you moved, Ryan.
Yeah. So my brewing space, I should say my dedicated space, was a basement bedroom. So underground bedroom, legal bedroom. I had egress window in case anybody was curious about that.
It's up to code.
Up to code, absolutely. And so the reason I say that is it's essentially a cellar, right? I mean, you basically got a cellar so you can keep it at really nice temperature, keep it in the mid 60s year round, and just be totally set. So I'll say climate. Climate is, you want to be, if you've got the ability to have it, in an area where the climate can be controlled, that would be great. That was my old place. Okay, now I did, Mead House North moved approximately 2 miles to now, Mead House North 2 or Mead House North New, and I didn't build this place or renovate it to have a brew room. I mean, if you want to talk about that, you gotta talk to Kurt Stack. I mean, I think Kurt Stack, when he moved, did that. I think he designed or built a cellar that he wanted. And every time I drive by the exit where his house is, I think I should just stop in and just see what he's up to. It's not far. I drive it every time I go to my cabin. I end up, driving through his town. Anyway, neither here nor there. So, I had to make do with what I had. Now, I didn't have a bedroom this time, but I had a lower level room that I could put these things in. Now, you said your wife Sheila didn't appreciate your stuff in her kitchen. I never would have dreamt of putting stuff in the kitchen. That would have just been, too much. But I did keep stuff in the laundry room, and we have a basement laundry room, and the laundry room got to a point too where I gotta be judicious about what I have in there. But what I do really like about our basement laundry room is, aside from the temperature climate control, but I've got another room downstairs that I can keep the stuff in, so climate control is okay, is that I've got a wash tub and a floor drain,
Nice.
and a sloped floor drain there. So those are the big things that I'm interested in. Do I have an outlet? I mean, okay, you're not gonna talk about a cellar here. It's not from the Wizard of Oz when they go in the storm cellar, and where they literally just a hole dug in the ground,
Right.
like a tornado shelter. But so you've got electricity, that's great. You've got running water, that's great. And a floor drain is really, really nice. I mean, yeah, of course, you've got a drain in the wash tub, but if you've also got a floor drain, that can make a big, big difference. If you spill anything, if you break anything, if you need to kind of hose something off, no problem. You've got that right there. So those are the three things that I think about. I should say four things. So climate control, via just a cellar, electricity, a wash tub, and a floor drain. And again, we're talking about being simple, we're talking about streamlining. Those things aren't necessarily things that you can control easily. You've either got them or a combination of them, or you don't. But I really like those. And then, beyond that, like you said, you talked about a lot of the streamlining stuff and just kind of getting smarter and smaller. I guess smaller and smarter has been
Right.
what I've done.
Space efficient.
Space efficient. There you go. What's on your mind?
So yeah, and my thoughts are kind of in that same general idea. The space that I'm going to be moving into for my brewing is an unfinished basement, but it's got all the rough-ins and all the prep to be finished. Initially, we had planned on finishing it just as one of our first projects, but I don't know if you've been to a lumber yard lately. Prices are through the roof, thanks to a number of factors, not least of which was that whole mess of snow in Texas in the middle of, was it April or May, that it has just apparently completely screwed up our supply chain on a lot of stuff. So yeah, that might be getting put off for a year or more. In the meantime, yeah, the one of the first things that comes to mind that I really need down there is plumbing, like some kind of a rough-in sink, or one of the utility sinks you see at Home Depot for like $100 or so. Some running water and a drain, because there is one of those floor drains that you were talking about, but it is clear across the basement. And just it would be a mess to try and use that for its intended purpose anytime I spilled something or something like that. So some kind of a sink to rough into the plumbing would be a great addition there. I have, while I was here in a much smaller house, I kind of reduced my brewing setup to more or less like 2 lines or 2 things brewing at once. And I totally intend to keep that. I've got a decent shelf system that I'm putting in there to kind of just basically transplant what I've got going here to there. The other thing that I'm kind of noodling and I'm really not certain about is whether or not I want to finally make the jump and put like a kegerator or a keezer or something like that in, just because I really like the kegs as far as a serving method and a way to use my space and not have to bottle. But it's kind of a pain in the butt to have those out without somewhere dedicated to put them.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a chest freezer in the room that I use for all my brewing equipment. But the chest freezer is full. We buy like a whole hog or like a quarter cow or things like that. So the problem is, my chest freezer is full of pork and beef,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and hops, by the way. Um, but
I don't know
you know,
any.
it's usually full of. I mean, eh, it's not like, oh, I've got this empty chest freezer, I can turn it into a Keyser or something like that, or lagering chamber. And so I don't. And I'll tell you that I don't keg for two reasons. And maybe one of them's not quite as good anymore, but the two reasons I didn't keg, number one was I I liked brewing and this is the one that might change, but I liked brewing a lot, and I liked brewing. I mean, at any given point in time, I have like six things going, and then I wanted to drink them, and I was like, oh, I want to drink some of this or some of that, and I don't want to be tied to a keg, right? I want to say, oh,
Right.
I want to try this, I want to try this, I want to try this. Well, my brewing is again, it's gotten a lot more streamlined, where I might only have like two or three at a time, that are really, that I might be drinking. So,
Mm.
or even less sometimes, like maybe two. And so maybe that's no longer quite the quite the excuse not to keg anymore, is by saying that, oh, you only have one. Well, the second reason is might be just as good. The um do you remember those jugs of wine, like Carlo Rossi, like the
Yes.
big, like one of those 5 liter jugs basically?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so when my wife and I were still dating, we were typically dating, or maybe right after we got married too, I don't remember, but younger,
Hmm.
little lower income. We would drink like bottles of wine,
Sure.
and then we'd say, hey, and we were buying pretty cheap wine. I mean, pretty, or very, very cheap wine, and uh, would say one time we were like, oh, well, it's cheaper. Like one of these jugs is like, I don't know what, four or five bottles of wine. I don't know, but we should, or more than that, and why don't we buy, these jugs, try these jugs, and it'll last us longer and it's cheaper. And I go, oh, okay, that sounds like a great idea. You buy the big jug of like
Hmm.
Carlo Rossi Chablis or something,
Yeah.
and we put it in the refrigerator. And here was the problem: if we were, drinking a bottle of wine, when the wine was killed, the bottle was empty, we stopped, right? Like, oh,
Right.
we opened a bottle of wine, we each had, two glasses or something, and watched a rerun of The Office or whatever, Friends or
Sure.
something, and then, oh, it's time for bed, we're done.
Hmm.
Well, when we had that jug open, it was just like, oh, how about just a splash more? How about just a little half glass more? How about just a little splash, just a little pinch more? And we were drinking more because the jug was open and it was just a little splash, versus the bottle was done, and that was the one. So the second reason I don't keg is that it would be too easy just to say, oh, I think I'll just have a splash more, just a little splash more, you know. versus, oh, I opened a bottle, the bottle's empty, I guess I'm done. Oh, I've had 2 bottles, the second one is empty, I guess we're done. And it kind of is. I know a lot of people out there saying, oh man, don't you have any self-control? And isn't it, I keg and I don't do that. Well, good for you. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. It's also just my personality. I know that it sometimes, it's easy. It's very easy for me just to walk over there and say, how about just 2 ounces more, just 3 ounces more, and the next thing you know, you've done that twice when you should have gone to bed a half an hour ago.
Yeah. And the fact that you recognize this and don't do that does demonstrate a level of self-control. So there's that. And I gotta say, I mean, the drawback to kegging that I felt prior to, some of the things we talked about as far as streamlining or changing the way we brew, I used to make braggots that were heavy, like in the 10 to 14% ABV range, and I would have 1 pint and be like, okay, well, I'm good. And so stuff would sit in that keg for months. Now I'm in the 5 to 7% range because it's just easier to drink. It's more kind of my style at the moment. And I feel like I can get through those kegs a lot faster, but there is something to be said for the fact that, oh yeah, I could just have another half a glass. It's okay. And that's a possible trap. So that's definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah. So, I did want to ask you though, before I lose my train of thought again for about the 8th time tonight, is you talked about, let's just say you did get your keezers in there, your kegerators, all that good stuff, your fermentation chambers, just everything good is in there. Have you made, or what about consider making a lager, a mead, lagering a mead? Now, I'm sure, and I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about like a Melomel or something, because there's, but we don't need to talk about like, no, would you lager a wine? Would you lager a cider? And down that thing kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about some of your braggots. Would you make a legitimate Czech Pilsner braggot? Or would you make a legitimate Schwarzbier braggot, or something that is a lagered style? And what do you think that would do?
I would definitely try. I'm not sure if it would be all that great. I don't know how the lager metabolism would affect honey as opposed to grain. I can tell you I do have there was so long-term listeners of the show know that the first good beer I ever drank was Czech Pilsner in Prague. And so it's kind of an important thing for me. For a while, one of Wyeast's private collection seasonal releases was a yeast from the České Budějovice brewery. So I got some of that. I brewed with it, even though I didn't have lagering set up. But I washed the yeast and I froze it with glycerin to hopefully have a stable product I can reuse. I would absolutely love to revisit that and try to make a lagered braggot, so to speak. By the same token, since that happened, Omega has come up with the Lutra Clean Kvike or whatever that would make an awesome fake lager.
Faux lager.
Yeah. And I would love to side by side those guys and see what happens, because I think either is a valid option. We're talking about making stuff for ourselves and our friends and family. So does it really matter if it's a real lager strain or if it's a Kvike strain? I don't think it does. But it's definitely something that I will absolutely be experimenting with, because that's the whole idea of a Czech lager, a German and Vienna lager for that matter, are very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I've made faux lagers, right? I've made some even US-05 you can use to make a faux lager.
Yeah.
And so I've made some faux lagers before, but it's just interesting. I've never, to do the thing, or to do a really cold, not, ferment or something like that. Now, again,
it feels like it'd be worth it.
Everything old is new again, because that was, first of all, everybody wanted to do these cold ferments, colder controlled ferments, and then everybody found Kveiks, and first it was like Saison yeast, and then it was Kveiks, and got into really hot brewing. And first of all, the hot brewing was just because you couldn't control the temperature. So, I can't, I don't have temperature control, and I live in Florida, and it's 80 degrees. What can I do? And you said, okay, well, how about the French Saison yeast, because that'll work. It'll, French Saison doesn't mind. Go ahead, do it. And then we started going to like Kveik, and then we started like intentionally cranking up the temperature, like my garden shed mead. I mean, 110, 15 degree, 115 degrees. Fermenting this thing, and just it tastes delicious. Okay. And now what's old is new again. We're saying, yeah, man, let's lager. Let's get down into the 50s, and let's ferment in the 50s, and then let's lager. And making a Vienna, I think that sounds delicious, right? Vienna lager braggot. I think that would be just fantastic.
Well, and I don't notice this at like liquor stores near you, but it seems like a lot of the microbreweries and craft breweries near me are finally like, okay, we're gonna challenge the macro guys, and we're gonna make lager beer too.
There's a couple that have made like really good. Like, I mean, Summit Brewing here in St. Paul makes they make a Keller, they call it Keller Pills.
Yep.
And that's unbelievable. They make one called Dakota Soul, which is a pilsner, I think, from all like South Dakota barley or something, and just it's very good. It's super fantastic. There's a lot that have done some good luck. Now I live in one of the more robust craft beer areas. I mean, yes. I live in basically northeast Minneapolis, and there's within like a 5 mile, or not even, let's just say like a 5 mile radius, just to be generous, like a 5 mile radius, there's probably like a dozen breweries, like legitimate breweries that bottle and can and sell in liquor stores and stuff. They have tap rooms, so or more maybe, and so I'm a little spoiled in that regard, but yeah, I mean, there are the Vienna lagers, the Mexican lagers, which kind of might be the same thing, but the Czech pilsners and the other pilsners and Schwartz beers, and there's one brewery that even they do a IPL, they call it. So an IPA is India Pale Ale. They do India Pale Lager.
Interesting. And
very, very good stuff. So now when we talk about the honey, I'd love to, like I said, some of these styles would just, I think, be fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And like I'm thinking about even making like a Vienna lager with some very, very, very gently bochet honey.
That could be interesting. I mean, there's a little bit of toasty notes in the Vienna lager as opposed to like a Czech or a German lager, so that would play very nicely, I would think.
Yeah,
You could
right.
almost do the same with kind of like a the Fest beer Oktoberfest style lager. It's in
Mhm.
the same regard with the Cara Munich grains that are more caramelized than a Pilsen malt, for example.
Right. Yes, like your Marzans and your
Mhm.
Oktoberfest. Those, I think those would just be unbelievable with honey. Here in there's a Surly brewery, and they used to make a beer. I don't know if they still make it or not. They called it Surly Fest, and it was again for Oktoberfest, and it was an overhopped, Marzan lager. So let's just pretend, for example, that the Marzan lager is supposed to have understated hops and I don't know 20 IBUs or something. This was just they just jam packed it with hops, and it was fantastic. And the former head brewer there used to say, "Hey man, I brew to taste, not to style." So didn't care that it wasn't to BJCP style because he was brewing to taste, not to style. And I mean they would sell, they'd sell enough of that every year to float a boat on.
And if the
People,
customers are buying it, who cares?
right? So, but as we talk about turning these into braggots, I think it would be really, really unbelievable
Mhm.
if you thought about if you had the temperature control to do some of these lagered styles, the German lager, you said all of these different styles,
Oh yeah.
um, and we're able to do them as braggots. I think it would just be um, just really, really interesting and really fantastic. And again, I know you can do the faux stuff, and maybe if you did side by side, it wouldn't make a difference. But
And I think the side by side is where we need to try it because side by side is easy. We've all done side by side by now, but doing an actual logger and then comparing it almost directly to a faux logger, it tells us whether this is the necessary step, whether we need to invest in this like temperature controlled fermentation station or whatever, or if we can get by with Kvike at 70 degrees.
well, since I don't have the temperature control set up, we'll need somebody else. If Jeff, when you get set up, maybe you can volunteer. In the meantime,
Meat House Nation.
Meat House Nation, absolutely. Meat House Nation. Anybody out there who's willing to do a side by side, please let us know. We we'll have you on the show. I mean, if you want to do it and send us samples, send us an email. You know how, if you listen to the show, you know how to get a hold of us. And info@themeathouse.com, as Jeff said. And if you do a side by side, pick a style, pick a Schwarzbier, Marzan, Vienna lager, Czech Pilsner, German lager, whatever.
Speaks to you.
And up to you, right? Pick a style and do side by side. Do one the way that they tell you, and then do one faux lager, like Kvike or something like that. Here's the thing. We can't give you an honorarium. We can't pay you for the experiment. But if you do the experiment, I will dig deep into the back of the closet and find some really fun gifts to send to you for doing this one. So, and if multiple people do it, no problem. We can send out multiple. I'd actually love multiple people to do it. I will dig deep because I think I found a pretty fun box in the back of the closet that I would love to send to some people. So if you guys want to do that, we're happy to do that. And I know there's other podcasts out there that encourage people to do experiments and send their results in, that don't even pretend like they're going to send you something in return. So, I mean, we're already, above that, right? So
Right.
do your experiment and we will send you something, that token. I mean, nothing. I don't want to get your hopes up here. You're not going to go home with a new kegerator or a new what are those things called that it goes right from like the brewing tank to the, I don't know. There were some really the
Unit tanks?
torpedo or something. Unit tanks, yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't have any unit tanks. We don't have any Grainfathers. So, but we do we do have some little token stuff that we would be happy to. And it's good token stuff, but that we'd be happy to shoot your way. So I'll always do that. Jeff, I'm looking at the clock, and if we are going to get to any of those, and by the way, I'm having a great time. We can do this all night. But if we are gonna try to answer a couple of Meat House Nation questions, we should probably get to them. Now, I don't know. Do we have any? I should say first of all, do we have any new ones? And if we do, we better start reading them.
I have a ton, actually.
Oh.
So obviously, this is a Reddit question from user Ukrawu, Krawu. Says he needs input for a spruce tip mead. So I'm on the train home from foraging right now. With me, I have a good 2 pounds of spruce tips, and the entire car smells like it. I feel like it's really easy to overdo it with these, so I'd like your input on what to do. I was thinking about making a spruce tea, steeping an amount of tips for 2 to 3 hours, and then letting it cool in the pot, then strain it and use the tea to make the mead. Any suggestions on how much to use? Does anyone have any experience? How fermentation affects the taste and smell?
No, next question. I'm kidding. So done spruce tips a couple of different ways. We have very good friends over at Spruce on Tap.
Yes, we do.
And they have some really good information on their website on how to do that. There's a few different ways to do it. The tea is very good. The tincture is another way to go. So you're using your grain alcohol or your vodka and creating a tincture. And either way, whether you're doing the tea or the tincture, you would want to again do it to taste. Do it very slowly to taste. I think there is the people have dry hopped with spruce tips.
That was actually that's just yeah.
Yep, you can do your dry hop. And the other way is an interesting way of it wasn't intended as a brewing mechanism, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't do it this way. What you do is you take your spruce tips and you put them, fill a mason jar up about halfway, and then pack brown sugar in it. And I should say pack. What I mean is, you put the brown sugar over it. You don't have to like pack it down, but again, the top and brown sugar is pretty wet, pretty moist. So you're gonna, unless you pack it, again, don't necessarily pack it, but you're gonna have some air pockets in there, and then put it in a sunny window or outside, if a place that gets a lot of sun. And as it sits there over a couple of months, over the summer, here we're getting to the summer, so you go ahead, you can leave it out there for 3 months, no problem. What happens is all of that brown sugar liquefies, whatever, and it turns into a syrup. And then the spruce tips in there, it'll become like the spruce tip syrup. Now, again, people that do this, they make, they put on their pancakes, right? So that's what it's intended for. But I don't think there's any reason at all that you couldn't use that as like a late addition. So what I mean is you've got your high Kreuzen, you're past that. And now you add in your spruce tip syrup, and you might want to, strain it through a hop stock or something, but, you add in that, and I think you boost your gravity or some sugar, but you'd also get this infused flavor. And it does kind of like go through a little bit of a minor ferment, because there is some yeast in there and some sugar and some things. Very, very interesting. Totally different flavor, by the way. Completely different flavor. But very interesting, and one you might want to do. The other thing you could do, that I would think about, is throw a few spruce, again, to get out your another mason jar, throw a few spruce strips in a mason jar, and add. You could leave it in the sun for a few days, or you don't have to, but it might be nice to do, and then add some starter. So some must, or some apple juice. I know Steve Piatz always said he liked using apple juice in his starters. He said that was a great way to do it. So unpasteurized, apple, or well, whatever, apple doesn't matter at that point, I suppose. But then creating a starter from any of the wild stuff on those spruce tips, and brewing with that might be another interesting way to add some texture, or at least talk value, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I think you've hit every point that I was going to hit, and then some. I love the brown sugar and spruce tip idea. I've heard of, as far as like the idea of making cocktail ingredients, the idea of making an oleosaccharin, where you take like the peels of citrus fruit and mix it with sugar and just kind of let that sit and let the sugar draw out the oils. It seems like a very similar idea here. Very, very fascinating stuff that I've not played with and kind of want to now.
Absolutely.
Let's move on here. This is from user Crucible FG123. Blending honey varietals and fermenting versus fermenting individual varietals and blending batches. I'm curious what your opinions are on the pros and cons of each, substantiated or not. Off the top of my head, two factors would be, if you blend batches, you can use different yeast and different honeys. If you blend honeys, you could make additions to the ferment based on combined flavor of the honeys.
Yeah. What I think is, it's a good palate check, I would say. Yeah. So for example, let's say you're using snowberry honey, and you're using orange blossom honey, and then you're using a meadow foam honey, then you're using a buckwheat honey. Well, I threw one of those, a couple of easy ones in there, but all of them were easy ones, right? But if you make meads with all of those things, and then it's single varietals, I'm talking traditionals here. Let's say you made a bunch of single varietal traditionals, and you taste all of them. You should get some significant differences, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, hopefully, that's okay. I mean, the thing is, don't feel bad or let people feel bad about things you can't control. You can't control if you're tall or short. You can't control if you're, bald or have a full head of hair, and a lot of people feel bad about those kind of things, and sometimes you get a double whammy on those things, and people, that's just, it's feel bad about stuff you can control. Don't feel bad about stuff you can't control. And a palate is similar to the baldness or the height, in that there are things that you can do to sharpen your palate, just like there's things you can do to try to retain your hair, but there are limits to them. You can't take someone that has wasn't born with maybe a super sensitive palate and turn them into a master sommelier. So, the point is, I'm trying to say is don't feel bad if your palate isn't super sharp. There are a lot of exercises you can do to make your palate, help your palate reach its full potential. When we say its full potential, that's going to be different. I mean, my palate's pretty middle of the road. I'm not trying to fool anybody and say that I'm a master taster. There are, I've got some guys here who are, Al Boyce has an amazing talent. Kevin Mensmo's got an amazing talent. Nathan Stigman's got just a fantastic palate. These guys blow me away on the things they can taste that I can't. Now, and that's just probably genetic. So, I try not to feel bad about it. But anyway, I guess the point is on this too. You should taste significant differences between a snowberry and an orange blossom and a meadow foam and a buckwheat. You should, and anybody probably could. Now, when you start blending those, you're going to probably taste some different parts of those in there, and it's fun. It's a fun experiment. You can do it. You can see how adding two things that are creates a third thing. Now, when you do them together, again, I'm going to hit one or two things that we've talked about before.
Sure.
It's of course it's easier. Of course, it is easier to say, here's a pound of this, a half a pound of that, 2 pounds of this, a pound of that. That's a lot easier than making 4 batches. But if you want ultimate control, you want ultimate control. That means you got to make 4 batches and then start, doing bench trials. Either way is fine. The thing, and Jeff, you let me know what you think, but I would say, I'm going to use those 4 weird honeys again that I know you never blend, but just humor me. If you were to take, let's just say 1 pound of snowberry, 1 pound of orange blossom, 1 pound of meadow foam, and 1 pound of buckwheat, and you were to, or 1 part, I should say, 1 part,
Sure.
and put them all together in a fermenter and ferment it up. I don't know, and I'm saying I don't know how different that would be than making that same 1 part in 4 different batches and then blending them all together in the same proportion and saying,
Right.
well, it's the same amount of honey, same amount of water. They were just fermented differently. Again, same if they were done with the same yeast or anything else. I don't know. Somebody else might have done that and say that there is a difference, but I don't know.
Well, and this feels like a very high level question, but it occurs to me that the control that I want is going to come from making 4 individual batches and kind of blending, X amount of the snowberry and Y amount of the avocado or the meadow, whatever, to bring out one flavor versus the other. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I land, where I would do it. The kind of blending in raw honey as I'm fermenting feels a little bit more ad hoc or shooting from the hip, where I'm trying to figure out a flavor for the finished product based on how it tastes before it ferments. And I do like the point that he made about using different yeasts to bring out the character of different honeys too. That could be very pleasant. Who's to say that snowberry won't taste better with a like a 71B, whereas maybe that meadow foam is going to taste, very nice with a clean US-05, for example. I'm talking out my tuchus here, so I guarantee would not recommend anybody try a US.
All right, what do we got next?
Oh, sorry. Let's see here. Do one more and then we'll call it a night. Oh, there's one I wanted to hit. This is by user John Wilkes Booth. Is my SG too low? Hey everybody, I wanted to try and make a mead because it seemed like it was a lot of fun. I read through the wiki, watched a fair number of videos, so I felt confident with what I was doing, but I felt like my SG reading off from my hydrometer is off due to my fault, I imagine. I'm making a traditional mead. I use 1 gallon of water with roughly 3.2 pounds of honey because I wanted it sweet. I'm using Lalvin D47 yeast, and for my dough as a nutrient. I mixed the honey with the water in 3 quarts, shook that around for 10 minutes, then I added the other quart, stirred that for another 5 minutes until everything seemed well mixed. At this point, I used a siphon to get a reading from my hydrometer, and it read 1.085-ish to 1.09 as far as I could tell. I was expecting to be around 1.115 according to the calculator. There were bubbles around the hydrometer, so I may have just misread it. And I have pictures I could post if that would be helpful. I'm shooting for a sweeter mead. I figured this lava will chew through most of the sugar and I'll end up pretty dry. Can I just add some more honey to my must now before the fermentation really kicks in?
I don't have a calculator up, but if you were to put in that amount of honey and that amount of water, is that what it would give you? And let's just, sure, yeah, it's easy. He measured everything right. That's what he did. Now, oftentimes I would say that it's because things were settled or weren't dissolved or weren't mixed.
Sure.
But it sounds like he shook the hell out of this thing.
Yes.
I mentioned earlier that I was staining the deck today, and I went to the hardware store and I got the deck stain, and they tinted it, and they put it in one of those paint shakers, those. It shakes up the paint to get the color all consistent. And I mean, it sounds basically like he did the equivalent of that. He did the equivalent of just putting, or he tried. Yeah, he put it in that paint shaker at the hardware store and got it all set there. So I guess I'd be surprised if things weren't mixed thoroughly. It's possible. I mean, that there was some things not fully dissolved or still there. The other thing is about getting a good reading. Did you have a good reading? Did you have your hydrometer the right with a bubble? He said he had some bubbles in there, some things like that. One of the best ways, if you got a 1 gallon jug, forget about siphoning anything out. I mean, just sanitize your hydrometer and drop it right in.
Right.
No problem. The other thing, if you remember our good friend Ricky Klein, Ricky the mead maker, up at the Groenfell mead, and where is he? Is it New Hampshire or Vermont? Vermont. He's in Vermont, and he was telling us he on a commercial batch, he was just going crazy because he hadn't hit his gravity. Just I mean, we're talking a commercial batch here.
Right,
I think he said $10,000 or more or something like that. I don't know what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And his issue was that the paper inside the hydrometer had moved. You remember that? Yeah. So the little piece of paper inside the hydrometer had shifted, and it must have been I don't want to say a cheap hydrometer, but a hydrometer that had that happen. And so all these times he thought he was freaking out. His gravity was right on. His hydrometer was just off.
Got to make you want to scream, right?
Yeah. So anyway, lots of weird things, and my job here isn't to diagnose exactly what the problem is, but just give you possibilities on the prescription. Or things. Some people say that prescribing without diagnosing is the definition of malpractice.
Yeah.
And I believe some of that. So it's I'm not going to sit here and just say that here's the prescription. I'm just going to say explore the possibilities. Explore the possibilities of what might be, and then let's identify. I guess identify what's going on. But now let's get back to this. Let's just
Yeah.
round out the night by saying, what do you say? 3.5 pounds, gallon of water. D47. Excuse me. D47 wants a sweet mead. Is he going to get it? Is he going to get a sweet mead at that range? I'm going to say that yes. I think that if you were to add 3.5 pounds to, and let's just use really, really old school rough math, that per roughly 1 pound of honey and 1 gallon of water in a gallon is 5% ABV potential.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking that 5, 10, 15, 17 and a half. He's talking at least 17 and a half potential alcohol by volume. D47 is rated to go to what, 16, 15, 14? 14? Okay, so if it goes to 14 and let's just say you get all the way there, even overshoot a little bit, you go to 15, you had enough potential gravity to hit 17 and a half. There's enough sweetness there to come through as a sweet mead, I believe.
Well, and I think there's a couple spots here that I'm a little. I think I see where things went wrong, because one of the things he talks about is he's mixed this 3.2 pounds in 3 quarts of water, and then he added that extra quart. So we're not dealing with a gallon of mead here anymore. We're dealing with a gallon and a half to a full quart. So that there's probably some dilution going on there that might account for his lower gravity. He mentioned his gravity that he's getting now is 1085 to 1090, and so D47, it's been a while since I've used it, but I know like 71B has a very similar alcohol tolerance, and I can reliably pull 110 points off D47. So I'm sorry, I can reliably pull 110 points off 71B. So D47 should probably pull somewhere in that neighborhood. I would assume, based on this information, that he's probably going to dry out, and he would want to add some more honey, but he might just want to let this dry out and then back sweeten after he's stabilized, rather than trying to throw more honey into it to get a sweet result. That's generally the better way to get a sweet result anyway, is just to let it eat the sugar that it's got in there, stabilize, and then sweeten to the level of sweetness you want, rather than try and hope the yeast leaves enough for you to get your palate right.
I agree. I think you're absolutely right that one of the best ways to create a sweet mead is to let it run all the way dry and then back sweeten it. The benefit of, I shouldn't even say the benefit, but where I've seen guys overshoot their gravity, right? When I say overshoot, I mean deliberately go so high on gravity that knowing that's going to end sweet, is typically fruit bombs. Typically, these guys with the big fruit bombs, they want to put all their fruit in, all their honey in, and then they want it to ferment all the way out, but still have residual sugar. I get that. I completely get it. I mean, it's hard to add, strawberry juice or something, if you stabilize. So I get it. So, but if you're talking traditional, I agree with Jeff. I mean, it's, you let it dry out, you go dry, and then you add in back sweeten with the honey. And I've heard people say, oh, well, you can taste it when it's raw honey. I've also heard a lot of really, really good judges, better palates than I do, that say, no, you can't.
Well, and I think that's a great spot to leave it for tonight. So thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us tonight. Thank you to Jessica DeBezin over at Mountain Rose Herbs for spending some time with us, and to Mountain Rose for sponsoring Iron V 2021. Look out for that coming very, very soon. Let us know what you're brewing. Email us over at info@themeadhouse.com or send us a message on Facebook or Twitter at The Mead House. In the meantime, happy mead making. That's it for this episode. Brian, you want to grab the lights on the way out? I'll put up the chairs here, and we'll be back next week with episode 201.